Chapter 26. We walked single file through the brush toward the truck, Donovan in the lead, followed by my father, me, and then Moja. The ground was slippery, and with all the gear, walking was difficult. My father wanted to fix one more location with the receiver before we tried for another elephant. We thought that they had probably gone a long ways, but he was wrong. As soon as we reached the savannah, we saw the elephants moving east toward the opposite hills. They moved briskly, out in the open, no more than 200 yards away. "Shoot them!" Donovan yelled. The two poachers in the truck looked at him like they didn't understand what he meant. Moja shouted something from behind me, and the men immediately jumped out of the truck and began scrambling for their rifles. "No!" my father yelled and ran forward. "No!" One of the men pointed his rifle at the elephants. My father stopped, raised a dart rifle, and fired. Pop! The man screamed and fell over with the dart sticking out of his neck. I heard a shot roar out from behind me, and my father crumpled to the ground. I ran over to him. "The elephants, Jake," he said through clenched teeth. "The elephants. Where are they?" I looked up and saw them running full speed across the valley. They'd almost reached the base of the East Hills and were out of range. "They're safe," I said. "Good." He'd been hit in the leg. Blood seeped out of the wound onto the ground and thinned as it was met by the falling rain. I put my hand over the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Donovan came over and stood above us. "That was stupid, Dr. Lanza," he said. "Very, very stupid." I looked over at the men my father had shot. Moja and the other man were trying to help him, but it was too late. He convulsed, then lay still. Moja and the other poacher looked coldly in our direction. We were in big trouble. Your father's pretty damn stubborn. No kidding. "We had a deal," my father said. Donovan sneered. "Not anymore. Those elephants are special," my father pleaded. "Don't you understand?" "I understand all too well," Donovan said. "That's why we've gone to so much trouble. Satonik said that only special animals come here. I knew where the elephants were going. That's why my father couldn't pick up the signal at times. The elephants were going back into the cave. If the poachers tracked them there, they'd be able to kill every one of them." Mojo walked over to us. "Mahega is dead," he said, and pointed his rifle down at my father. "Don't kill him," Donovan said calmly. Mojo looked at him angrily. "Why?" "Because someone will pay for his return." Moja's jaw tensed, and it was obvious that he didn't like the answer. He continued to point his rifle at my father. I didn't breathe. "He's no good to us dead," Donovan continued. "I will give you half the money that I get for him." Mojo glanced away from my father to Donovan. "It should be a substantial amount," Donovan continued calmly. "Along with the money we're going to get for the ivory, you'll be a rich man." Mojo raised his rifle barrel. I took a breath. "Get the truck ready," Donovan said. "We'll go after the elephants." Mojo nodded and walked away. Donovan looked at my father. "No need to thank me, Dr. Lanza. You won't get away with this." Donovan laughed. "I already have." He looked at me. "You're coming with us," he said. "We may need your help with the elephants." "I've got to help my father," I said. "Your father can take care of himself. He has his medical kit. Now come with me." He pulled me away from my father, and I jerked out of his grasp. Moja came running over and pointed his rifle at me. "Take him to the truck," ordered Donovan. "Go ahead, Jake," my father said. "I'll be fine. Do what they say." Moja pushed me in the back with his rifle barrel. "Move." I started walking to the truck. I climbed into the back of the truck with the other poacher. As we pulled away, I looked back at my father. He had already opened the medical box and was dressing his wound. The wheels of the truck slipped and spun in the mud as we drove toward the east hill where the elephants had gone. When we got to the base of the hill, we had to get out and walk. The elephants' platter-sized footprints led us toward the cave. We cut through the grove of yellow fever trees and came to the baobab. They stopped at the pile of rocks around the tree. The poacher said something to Moja, and Moja shrugged. "Lumea's grave," I said. Moja's expression changed. He seemed frightened. "How do you know this?" "I know," I said. He and the other man began talking rapidly to each other. Donovan turned around. "What's going on?" The two men ignored him, and he walked back to them. I said, "What's going on?" "Lumea," Moja said, pointing at the rocks. "Who the hell's that?" "This is not a good place," Moja said. "What do you mean?" Donovan was angry. "This is where the elephants are. Let's go." The three men began to shout at each other. I stepped away from them. They didn't seem to notice. I took another step. They continued to argue. Another step. They didn't pay attention. I started to run toward the cave. Behind me, the shouting came to an abrupt end, and I knew they had discovered I had slipped away. I got to the path leading to the cave and started up. I didn't know what I was going to do once I got there, but I had to do something. Outside the entrance, I paused. The elephants were inside. I could see their silhouettes moving around. Since the ceremony had worked, it occurred to me that Sapit might not even be there anymore. I looked over the edge and saw the three men running toward the path. Too late to go back. I had to go inside. I kicked my tennis shoes off and moved very slowly through the entrance. The entire herd milled around inside. The sound of their rumblings echoed off the cave walls like thunder. I put my back to the wall and moved counterclockwise around the cave. There wasn't time to move slowly. The poachers would be at the entrance any second. Twice, elephants brushed against me. I froze and held my breath, thinking that I was going to be crushed to death, but both times the elephants moved away. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the tunnel leading to the cavern. I crawled through it. Rain poured in from the hole in the ceiling. Sapit was in the same position that I had left him, sitting cross-legged next to the fire, which was nothing more than wet ashes now. He had his head thrown back, letting the rain pour over his face. Sapit! He didn't move. Sapit! I went over to him and shook his shoulder. Sapit! He brought his head forward and opened his eyes. The swelling was completely gone. You can see! Nakukua, he said, holding his hands under the water, the long reins. I know, I said. I know, but we've got problems. There are elephants in the cave. Yes, he said. They've arrived some time ago. You don't understand, I said. The poachers are there on their way up the path. They could be at the entrance by now. He still didn't seem concerned. It's not a good place for them to be. It's not a good place for us to be, I shouted. It's a dead end. They're going to kill the elephants, and then they're going to kill us. It is not a dead end, he said calmly. There's another way out of here? No, he said. Only the way you came in. Go look. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I ran over to the tunnel and looked anyway. I saw the elephants ambling around. Then I saw two poachers arrive. They were backlit in the entrance and looked like shadows. I turned to Sapit. They're here, I whispered. Good, he said. Are they at the entrance? Yes. Borrow, he said. What do you mean? They're going to shoot the elephants. I think not, he said. Borrow. I had no idea what he was talking about, but then I understood. Borrow, of course. I took a deep breath and I let out the loudest, blood-curdling scream that I could. My scream was joined by the elephants trumpeting. The ground shook. I looked down the tunnel and watched as the elephants stampeded out through the entrance like a barrage of cannonballs, and then it was quiet. The only thing I could hear was the water trickling inside the cavern. I turned. Sapit got to his feet and walked over to me. I think this is yours, he said. He handed me the Kachina doll. I turned the doll over in my hand, but I gave it to... Satonik wants to thank your grandfather for loaning it to us. But Satonik's dead, I said quietly. Yes, Sapit said. He is with the other Kachinas. My father, I said. We've got to get to him. Yes. Sapit crawled through the tunnel first. I waited until he was through, then crawled through myself. By the time I got into the cave, Sapit was standing outside of the entrance. I joined him. He pointed down. Moja and the other poacher were lying on the rubble at the bottom of the cliff. I looked for Donovan, but didn't see him. Donovan must have gotten away, I said. Sapit began running down the path. I followed him. We passed the baobab and ran through the grove. When we got to the other side of the grove, I heard the sound of the truck wheels spinning. I looked to my right and I saw that Donovan had gotten the truck stuck in the soft mud of the savannah. Sapit pointed at the Land Rover near the airplane. Is that your father's vehicle? Yeah, I said, but I don't know how to drive. I'm a New Yorker. Sapit laughed. I can drive, he said. I'm a Maasai. We started running across the savannah. As we ran, I looked back at Donovan in the truck. He was still stuck, but seemed to be making progress. When we got to the airplane, I looked again. He was moving slowly toward us across the savannah. Sapit got into the Land Rover, and I started to climb in next to him, then stopped. I went to the airplane and got Sapit's spear. I put it in the Land Rover and checked Donovan's progress. There's time, I thought. I wanted to leave a little surprise for Donnie. I pulled something out of the Land Rover and jogged back to the airplane. Hurry, Jacob, Sapit said. We must go. This will only take a second, I said, finishing up. I jumped in the Land Rover and we drove off. Halfway to my father, I looked back and saw that Donovan had reached the airplane. He was already inside and had switched on the engine. Sapit drove to where my father was, and we got out of the Land Rover. How are you? I asked, looking at the bandage around his leg. Okay, he said. What's going on? Moja and the other one are dead, I said. And Donovan's going to get away, he said disgustedly. We watched as Donovan brought the airplane around facing south. It began to move forward and gathered speed. The nose left the ground and took off. He's probably going to fly to the place where he has the eye restored, my father said, wherever that is. I reached into the Land Rover and took out the tracking receiver and antenna. I handed them to my father. What's this for? Try frequency 127, I said. Point the antenna south. But the elephants are to the east. I know, I said, but the airplane is to the south. He turned the receiver on and held the antenna above his head. The signal from the transmitter I had attached to the airplane came in loud and clear. Beep, beep, beep. Donnie's going to be surprised, I said. He sure as hell will be, my father said. Get me into the Land Rover. We've got to get back to camp.